Hello, so we're going to just do a quick video on the three things we looked at today in class. I know the morning class got to see this, but the afternoon class, I thought we were better off focusing on our UV and more than anything. But I'll do it in this video as well as cover it again and the other kind of things we're going to be looking at. So why we're looking at these? So we're going to be going into the realm of props, and then we're soon going to be going into the realm of foliage, and it all kind of ties into this. The bigger elements like walls, floors, roofs, ceilings, window frames, doors, they're all quite simple. Being the simplest being our big floor. And then we go to our walls and then our door frames and our doors. Things get gradually more complex, but in that kind of realm, only a little bit complex. But when we go into props, props are surprisingly complex. If I have, so I've got this little if I unplug it, there you go. I've got this little slave keyboard thing I use sometimes in my work, and if we look at that, that's quite a complex little object, really. Now you could make this really, really cheap and basic on an object, in a scene. It depends what you're doing, but really, when you look at it, it's a surprisingly complex piece of kit because it's not just a box with some buttons or anything like that. It's actually got 3 levels of material in the depth in this section. It's got a little USB-C plug. It's got holes for where these dials go. It's got the dials themselves, which themselves have information, and it's got holes where the keys go, as well as the information for the keys. And then you've got the texture for the back and stuff. Now, obviously, in a game situation, we wouldn't model all that information to that level. You'd only do that if you were doing this for previs, not previs, marketing, visualization, product rendering kind of stuff, which what we learn can absolutely take you there. But if we think of something like keyboards, we think of something like cameras, we think of something like, I'm trying to look around me at the minute, I've got a webcam right there. There we go. When we get down to this more kind of level, things do actually get a little bit complex. We're still all based in some sort of primitive based design, but that's why it's good to model stuff from a kind of a pseudo modern day, I'd say 60s to modern day, because everything has been standardized as like a production pipeline, and things, unless they're super bespoke and expensive, are built to simple primitives, cubes, cylinders, spheres, cones, that kind of stuff. But then you got stuff like wires, you got stuff like vases, you got stuff like cups, all this kind of stuff. Things do get a little bit more complex. And we can absolutely model all these kind of things the way we have done already. We can create a base form and then add edges and form it from there. You can absolutely do that. But there are a few things we can do that help us expedite this. It's not taken away from our need to think about the fundamentals, think about density, complexity. So why should this phone charger here, why should that be 2,000 polygons when a table is 150, 200, 300? Just because something has got a lot of curves on it doesn't mean it needs a ton of information, because you've got to think about the relative size of that object in the scene itself. This is quite small. Anyway, so what are we going to do? Get myself comfy. First of all, what I'm going to show you is something where we can rapid prototype out a lot of cylindrical based objects. We're thinking cups, we're thinking mugs, we're thinking vases, we're thinking bottles, we're thinking pepper grinders, salt grinders, that kind of stuff. It's very, very cool. It does need us, all these are going to be based off using something called a curve. And some of you might have used curved in Blender or Maya or 3ds Max or whatever. Some of you might have even used curves in things like Illustrator or Photoshop or Clip Studio, curve path kind of stuff. It's all based pretty much off that. But the one thing we need to do is change our camera perspective. So while I'm in my viewport here, finally getting into it, I'm going to tap space, and tapping space just brings us to our fore view. And what I want to do is either get a front or a side. For this, it doesn't really matter, but I'm going to go for a front. So where it says front down here, I'm going to hover over this window, tap space again. That's going to bring me into that window right there. Cool. Now, I could do this by eye, but what I'm going to do is actually get some kind of definite height in there, and maybe even definite width in there. So just to give me a bit of a guideline, what I'm going to do is make a cube. and I'm going to make it, say, my height-wise, I'm going to make something which is 30 centimeters. So I'll go, okay, it's going to be 30 centimeters high, which is, that's pretty good right there. My depth, my width are going to be, so I'm looking at something right here that's my own, I'll say, I'm going to rough out about 10 centimeters. Okay. Okay, that doesn't look right. Height, 30. So we're going to rotate it right around for a start. There you go. Right. Okay, so I'm just going to use this as a guideline. It's going to be off to the side here. Now, we need to really think about, because we've got our grid set up like this, we're not going to come out and use these as a guideline, because, you know, that is 1 meter. That is 2 meters. You know, big. This is huge. So I want to really do something which is to scale. So I'm going to make something which is about this big. I'll just height-wise anyway. Right, so what are we going to do? So all I'm going to do is creating a curve to help me create this geometry. Now, where do we find curves? Now, curves are really easy. Curves lives in the curve menus right here. For what we're going to do, curves live here. And then we've got this third option along. We've got the EP curve. So we're going to click on the EP curve. I'm going to go from the bottom upwards. We're going to go from the ground upwards. We're going to build up from it. And all I'm going to do is, I'm not doing anything with my left hand at the minute. Just clicking to do this. So what I'm going to do is click somewhere near the center, not on the center, but somewhere near the center. So click. And then I'm going to click again. And you see that there's actually a curve, a line being produced. I click again, and you see that curve start to appear. So if I click now, and then I press W now, boom. Here you can actually see that we've got some kind of shape happening, which is great. And this is a curve. So curves are non-geometric. They're all calculation based. We don't actually take curves into our game engine for any kind of modeling standpoint. We use them for guiding objects and that kind of stuff. We wouldn't even take them from here. We'd produce them in the actual engine. Sorry, I lost my point then. So yeah, we've got this curve that we don't take them into the game engine, but what we're going to use this for is actually for a way to actually produce geometry. So this is still an object in the scene. It's not an object like this. This is a geometric object. This is a curve object. So if I hold right click, you'll see that we've still got the similar kind of menu that we have when we're on an object, but it's a little bit different. Now what we've got is this, but what we want to use is something called control vertex. So I'm going to like that. And what you'll see is you've got these little purple dots. And these purple dots are, again, if you've ever used Illustrator or if you have these curve paths inside any kind of software, these are Bezier points. These are curve points, and it generates a curve based on the average position of these points. And you know the beginning of a piece of curve because it will have a little, it doesn't get bigger as you get closer to it, but you'll see this might have a little bit of a square, and then you'll have a little U shape here. Little U shape. That shows me the very beginning of the curve. So what I'm going to do is just lift this so it's snapping to the grid. And what I'm going to do is form a shape. I'm just going to highlight and move these curves around, these points. And notice as well how I didn't mass click and just add a ton of curves. I've added only a few curves. And this gives me much more control over much curvier surfaces. So I'm going to do something a little bit like this. And you might kind of understand. You might get what I'm doing. So I'm going to do something like that. Maybe drag these two in a little bit. Like that. Okay. So we got those. Okay, so we've got this little curve shape going on here. That's great. Notice how, again, I'm not coming to the center. I'm kind of leaving a little bit of a gap. And I'm coming up like that. Super, super good. Now what I can do now, and this is the cool part, with this selected, I'm going to come up here to surfaces. Little document menu here called surfaces. And we've got this little like goblet icon here with a little arrow going around it. And this is something called revolve. And if I click that, hey, look at that. What it's done is it's produced a piece of geometry that revolves around the center of the world. So it needs to be near the center. This is important why we need to be using the center of the world. We've revolved around the center of the world to create this piece of geometry. which is really good. Now, this isn't actually geometry as we need it. This is something called a NURB, or a non-uniform rational B-spline. And these are used in loads of different things. They're used a lot in VFX. They're used a lot in rendering, animation, that kind of stuff. But for us, this isn't actually what we're going to be taking into the game engine. We're going to be taking something different. We're going to modify this to be our object later on. But what I want to show you first of all is the fact that we've still got that curve right there. So that curve is still there. It's still active. So I go back to front view now. So with that curve selected, what I can do is go back to curve points. And if I move these curve points, you'll see, or these control points, you'll see that the geometry actually changes. Because it's being controlled by this curve point. And because it's revolved, it goes all the way around in a circle. So this is actually really good for us to make very quick geometry, very quick things. So I'm just going to move them out. You can see that I can make some really kind of cool shapes. And I can drag this around. I can do all sorts of stuff. You know, woo, look at that. So I can very, very quickly make some kind of shape like this. Like that, okay. So as you can see, I've made a vase. Very, very cool. So why it's good for us to work in the middle of the world as well is if I start to move this away, you'll see that, let me make sure nothing else is selected. So just a curve. If I start to move this away, you see that it starts to expand. That's because it uses the center of the world as its origin point to generate this geometry. So if I start to move it away, you start seeing it. Oh, it starts getting big. Which, you know, you could absolutely use this to do stuff. What if we use this exact same curve technique to make, if we were doing big planters for some sort of big environment or whatever, you know. So Revolve uses this curve to revolve. Some softwares call it lathe, to lathe a piece of geometry. Cool. So we've made this, and I'm happy with this shape. I think, okay, yeah, I can take that into the game after a few modifications. So what I'll do now is actually convert it to a piece of geometry. The process is easy, but the amount of things we can do to produce this new geometry is, you know, a few, but it's worth experimenting. All we have to do is with the actual NURB surface, not the curve, the actual NURB itself selected, I'm going to go to Modify, down to Convert, and then the very first one, NURBS to Polygons, the option box. There we go, so this is it. So by default, your settings are going to look like this. And we could absolutely just go Apply, and then we get this. And that's technically usable, but it's very bad. Very, very bad. So what we're going to do is mess around with some of these settings, and you feel free to mess around. You can play with General. So what General does is it will use every U horizontally going round and every V vertically going up. It will say, right, I'm going to put 3 divisions between each span. So from there to there to there to there, put 3 divisions. If I do this, oh, actually, no, sorry, it'll put 3 divisions from there to there to there. So 3 divisions going round and 3 divisions going up. So it won't work. So what we can do is do like, okay, I'm going to put 10 going horizontally. I'll put 20 going vertically. Now we get something like this. And you can see it's set to triangles as well. If we set that to quads, we get that. I'm just going to invert these numbers actually. That's better. So that's 20 going upwards, but 10 going round. So that's one thing you can do. And again, experiment with these settings. What I do is quite simply, I make sure it's in quads, because I want it to be quads, and I use counts. So I can actually tell it how many polygons I want in this surface altogether. So for this, I might say, you know what, I want no more than 150. So I actually put in this number here, 150. I click Convert or Apply, and then I got this. And look at that. That is tasty. So there's 150 polygons in there, which is very nice. And again, because we're thinking, like I said at the beginning, of that size, that relative size kind of thing, that's perfectly good for my scene, because that is going to be a simple object. It's just going to carry whatever, and that's all we really need. Obviously, this geometry isn't finished just yet. We need to do some stuff to it, but also one thing we need to do, and this is a big thing when you're dealing with this kind of information, anything that's being controlled by curves or anything like that, I've made this. I've modified this off, but what I can also still technically do is modify it, which might be good. But what if you've done a load of different versions of this, and you've accidentally not realized that every time you've made a modify convert, that it's still modifying. So you end up having what you thought was a bunch of variations ends up being the exact 20 exact same ones. So what you do when you convert it and you think, okay, I'm happy with that, all you got to do is delete history, middle one. You don't need to freeze transformations. You just need to delete history, because all this information, all this kind of control is based off history. This is our phone call conversation. We've made the phone call. What we've done when we've deleted history is put the phone down. We've ended that conversation. So boom, that's our stuff right there. And this obviously is still absolutely modifiable. So if I go in here, I can say, you know what, I'm going to make this a little bit more of a something like that. That kind of vase. And then again, I modify. I've got my menu up here. I can leave this as 150, but what I'm going to do is maybe take this down to 125, seeing it's a little bit thinner. There we go. So you can see there the density is similar, because I'm thinking, well, I'm going to bring down the number a little bit because it's not as fat near the waist. But obviously I need to delete history. Cool. So we've got those. As you can see, you can rapid prototype a lot. You can rapid prototype out a lot of things. But what we want to do now is actually make these into something we can actually put in the game. The problem being is number one, underneath we've got a hole in the base, because obviously we didn't take this all the way to the middle. We had to give it a little bit of a gap, so we've got that. Two, if we look from the side there, it's very unstable. If we were to actually put physics on this, it would just fall over straight away. So we've got to sort that out. And number three, the insides are just a single plane, so there's not actually any depth to it. So we're going to need to add depth. So one step at a time. So number one, what I want to do is close off this hole. Now we can be a bit dirty about it and just select all the edges around the outside, extrude, and merge to center. That's one way we can do it. We can also, if we just select one of the edges and hit bridge, it'll fill. Oh, sorry. If we go to, you don't want to do it there. So we'll go to edit mesh and fill hole, which is right in front of me somewhere. Fill hole. Where's fill hole gone? Fill hole. There you go. So it's in mesh, fill hole. That will. Oh, there's a little bit of an edge there. So even there, I had a double extrusion for some reason. That's what I want. So, so that might mean this has a... No, this doesn't have a double extrusion. That's cool. Right. Oh, it's because I did the extrusion. I'm a bit thick. So what we can do with this one is we can do a simple kind of quadding. So we can take that across there. So and then we can just put that across there to make that one. And then there to there, there to there. And now what we've got are 8 quads. So we can do that. However you want to fill that up, I think this is a nice way of doing it because it's obviously quadded and no triangles. And then we move to actually make the surface a bit more kind of stable. So what I'm going to do is just take this. I'm going to bevel this bottom edge right here. Just a little bit. Because I want a little bit more information so I can snap that to the grid. Scale that out a little bit. And then on the inside, I can bring it in. Add an edge. Going around there. Then move this up a little bit. Maybe scale it out a little bit. And then you've got one of those, you've got a dip that's in the bottom of everything. A glass, a bottle, a cup, whatever, And now when we've done that, and we do the same thing on this one. And now when we've done that, we do the same thing. Good English. Now this one, this has got... this one, because of the count, has got 11 edges going around it. So for this one, because it's an odd number, it's not going to be quadable. I'm going to just do a dirty one like that. Go to front mode. I'm going to, again, just bevel that bottom edge a little bit. And then snap that to the grid. That looks fine. Add an edge. grab that bottom bit, move it up, maybe move this out a little bit. And I could actually bevel both these edges just a little bit like that. Not a lot. I don't need a lot of bevels. I don't need a lot of edges. Like that. So now when you soften that edge, that'll look nice and soft. Boom, look at that. Tasty. And you can see how smooth that looks. Even at such a low resolution, you can see very, very smooth. So the last thing we do now is actually add depth on the inside. Now this is where we get to think, do we want to be true or do we want to be clever? If we want to be true, it means that all we need to do is extrude, have the whole thing selected, and extrude, and then just offset inwards like that, or thickness inwards. And this is creating the actual density of the porcelain, or whatever it's made of, the clay. Like that. Obviously you want to reverse the faces, and then you can add divisions around the outside like this. Again, just enough to imply a curve on the top. Again, when we soften that. Not reverse, soften. There you go, so it looks nice and soft. Now that's a true way of doing it, because that means that it is actually a fully hollow vase with everything in the inside. It's got thickness going all the way through the middle. As you can see, thickness on the inside. But how much are we actually going to see the inside of that object? Probably not a lot. The only time that's ever going to be really good is if we're able to smash an object, or like, because then you want to, when it disintegrates, you want to make sure that you can see all the pieces. Or if you're in a game like, let's say, Laser Fear, where you're actually going to pick up the vase and actually rotate and look inside, because maybe there's a clue hidden on the inside or something like that. So that's the true way of doing it. The tricky way of doing it is thinking, well, if I'm going to put flowers in this, if I'm going to put anything in this, how far can I actually see inside? Okay. So what I'm going to do is still do the same thing. I'm going to extrude in, bring the thickness in a little bit. But this time what I'm going to do is just look inside. I'm going to find an edge, maybe that one there. Delete that all the way around. So if I go to X-ray mode, you can see I've just on the inside selected an edge going round. Deleted it. And then everything else I'm just going to get rid of. Because then, this bottom bit, what I'm going to do is just grab that bottom edge that I've just separated off. Extrude, merge the center. And then I can flip the geometry. And then I can there you go. So now what we've got is, from the looks of it, perfectly fine vase, exactly like the other one. It's just that this doesn't go all the way in. And this is a perfectly nice way of doing it. Perfectly nice way. So look at that. And imagine rapid prototyping a bunch of stuff from this. And you can do that with anything that's cylindrical. You can't do anything which is cubic, or it's harder to do with cubic stuff. But anything that's cylindrical, you can rapid prototype stuff off. And then obviously from this, if you're making something like a mug, anything with a handle, you'd have to make the handle separate. You know, if you're making something like a semaphore where you've got two little hooks on the side to kind of, again, you'd have to make those separate. But really, really quick, rapid prototyping. Look at them vases already done. And what that is the revolve. And that lives in creating the curve. Lives in curves, and it's the third one along this EP curve. And then to revolve, you use this guy here. Now we're gonna just move those off to the side. Ooh, in fact, we're just gonna delete history on all of that, and then just move it all to the side. There we go. The next thing I'm going to show you is something similar to that, except that going round, we're going a direction. And what I'm going to do is set up a number of curves for this. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I'm going to go 1, oops. So complete that curve, make another one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Will be that one. And then I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Do that one. And then I'm going to start to rotate stuff. So I grab this one, just rotate it around a little bit, maybe scale it up a little bit. Grab this one, rotate it around like that a little bit, maybe scale it down a touch. And this one I'm going to leave it as. Now what we do with this is if we select 1, then 2, and then 3, we go back to the curve, the surfaces menu, and we go to loft, which is next to revolve to the right. Look at that. So what it does is it takes from the first edge you've selected, a curve selected, to the second curve, to the third curve. You can do that, as many curve points as you want to, as many curve forms as you want to. And it creates a piece of geometry between those. Now, this has a lot of very cool uses. You can, I mean, to me, just straight away, this kind of looks like the back of some kind of like sports car or something. But again, just like before, this is a curve which has control points that you can modify. Now, this is kind of looks like curtains, doesn't it? And again, it's all modifiable. It's very cool. So you can have an experiment with that and think like, okay, if I make a curve point or whatever, and I make a bunch of them, you can do some really cool stuff. Very, very cool. And you have the same opportunity of converting this into geometry as you did before. So with the NURB selected, I'm going to go to Modify, Convert NURBs to Polygons, and choose some options. Now for this, it's a little bit trickier because it's a bigger surface. Some bits might do really well. As you can see, that's actually done really, really well there. But it might get a little bit more kind of difficult in these more defined areas. So you're going to have to find a magic number. If you're just doing this quads and count, you'll have to find a magic number. You can also do general. You can also experiment with this. So how many V, how many U? So that's 20 U and then 10 V. So it's 10 divisions going down the length, 20 divisions going down the width. So what if I convert that to be the opposite? There we go. What if I do a little bit more? So I'll do 20 going down there, but I'll do 40 going down. There we go. So now you can see adding a little bit more definition has added me some more geometry. It fits a little bit more. And you can experiment, and this would be really good for making, all sorts of things. Again, it's not going to give you, just like the other Revolve, it's not going to give you perfect geometry straight away, but it's a really good jumping off point. You might be able to use this kind of stuff for foliage. You might be able to use this kind of stuff for drapery. All sorts of things you can use it for. So that is lofting. So it's very similar to Revolve. Instead of just going round, this time we're going across. We're going linear. And of course, you can do that in any angle because these are just curves. What if we were to go from the top downwards? Like this. What if, now we've got something that looks like billowing curtains. And again, it's all modifiable until you convert it. And then even after you convert it, you need to delete the history. So lots of fun stuff we can do with that. Cool. So move that to the side. So that's a lot of stuff we can do so far. We've had revolving using curves and then converting. That's really good for rapid prototyping, basic cylindrical objects. You've got this lofting, which is really good for making anything that's kind of flowy. As long as it's static, though, it won't be able to have animation apply. Well, we won't be applying animation to it. And the last thing is, again, still using a curve. So if we're on the grid, what I'm going to do is just start placing down some curve points in a kind of spiral, kind of like this. Okay, so I've got some curve points. No, actually, it's a good point to show you this as well, actually. What I'll do is I'll just mad click like this. I'll just make a curve. So I've done a load of clicking and I've made this curve. Now, this isn't quite as curvy and smooth as my other ones. That's because through all the mass clicking, what I've done is... Oops, pressed animation. What I've done is added a bunch of points in there, and it means that my geometry is far less smooth and controllable. It's a bit horrible. What I can do with any of these curves before or even during when I've lofted, when I've revolved, what I can do is rebuild this curve to have the right amount of control points or spans on it. This is very easy to do. So I want to deal with curves because we've got a curve here. I come up to curves. This is in our normal poly modeling shelf. Come down to curves, rebuild, option box. And all I'm changing in here is this number of spans. So if I was to put 6 inside here, it'd get really low res because it's trying to produce this whole curve from 6 control points. Bit harder to do. So what if I put something like 12 in there? Bit smoother. Okay. So I wouldn't put anything like 1,000 in there because that's just going to get too crazy. But you know, with within reason, the less control points, the smoother the curve. But you can, well, that kind of stuff. Boom. And then you can obviously delete points if you need to, like, oh, this is too long, I'm going to, you know, get rid of it. Or I can even delete points in between different points like that. Curves are very, very useful. But the last thing I'm going to show you is something called sweep mesh. Now, we've actually been looking at this all the time that we've been modeling in the poly modeling shelf. It's been right in front of us. And it's this little guy here, it's a little S shape. It's called sweep mesh. If I click that, you'll see that a piece of geometry is produced on our curve. Look at that. Piece of geometry produced on our curve. And then you would have seen then that sweep, this comes up. Now, this is the attributes editor right here. This is the attributes editor, which is docked on the side here. And inside there, you'll have anything which is controlling our object. So inside here, we've got a load of different options. At the top, that's our profile. And a profile is the shape of our object. So here we've got a poly, which is just a cylinder. Then we've got a rectangle. You can see the options kind of change. We've got a line. We've got an arch. We've got a zigzag. And then we can even get a custom shape ourselves as well. So we can actually have a different object on there. Underneath there, again, you would have seen that they all would have, the settings would have changed for depending on what we're doing. So you've got all these different things. You know, so I can make a really nice low-res 6-sided cylinder. And then I can click distribution, and distribution just basically takes the center of the control and distributes, in this case, 5 of these around. I can increase that, I can decrease that. And then I've got, you know, scale out, so how big is that profile? Rotation, so I'm rotating the entire thing. Coverage, so I can either go collapse it all together like that, or I can have it spread out. Very, very cool. Alignment, so if I turn that on, I can actually move this along the curve depending on what I want to do with it. So I can have this curve wrapping across the top of a surface, and then have this alignment, so this, whatever I'm sweeping across it, traces that alignment. And then we've got scale profile, and that'll scale the profile. We've got rotate, which is similar to what we did in the other one. And then we've got twist. Now twist is fun, because twist will actually twist the geometry. So if I crank twist up to something like 50, boosh, you can see there that I'm actually twisting that geometry a lot. A lot. And then we've got taper, and taper is, well, taper is taper. You know, we got all these different options, and they've all got fun things to play with. No, I've kind of taken mine a little bit further than I should do with this, so I'm going to cram it all back down to some kind of normality. Distribution, boom. And then we've got, oh, you got taper curve as well. So this actually allows me to taper the curve. So if I turn off taper completely, okay, so I'll put it as 1. Okay, so what I can do with taper curve is, as you can see there, I can actually taper the shape of the curve through. So it goes from thin to fat to thin to fat to thin to fat to thin to fat. It's very, very cool. And you got options there, so you can do all sorts of jazz. You can have a lot of fun. You can even make it nice and smooth. It's all very, very cool. But again, fun options to do. Fun things you can do. There you go. Let me just make the profile a bit bigger. Scale profile. There we go. And the last one, now this is an important one, because as you might have seen, this is quite a dense little piece of geometry. Quite a little dense piece of geometry. And now I can't be using this for everything. If it's a very, very large piece of geometry, sure, yeah, I can add a bunch of geometry to it. But if I'm using this for something small, like a cable or a rope or something like that, I need to control how much geometry is going down and around this. We can do that obviously by making the sides nice and low, but lengthwise, we've got this interpolation. And we've got a few options. So we've got this not optimize option, it does its best. But we've also got this interpolate, or this precision. And the lower the number, the lower the amount of edges. But we don't really have much control over this. It kind of does what it thinks it needs to do. But what I can do is play with some of these. So start EP it'll basically, if you set to EP, it'll say, right, in between each control point, it'll have, say, 9 divisions. Oop, interpolation back. Distance, again, distance is not bad, but it's kind of the opposite of what I want. But if I do start to end, I can say, okay, you know what? Going down, I want 20. Going down, I want 25. I can control the amount of geometry that goes from one point all the way down to the end. And this being part of a curve, so I've still got my curve inside there, as we can see. What I can do is grab those control points, move them around. So I can make some cool shapes with this. Shapes that are a lot harder to make with just geometry. So that, you know, if you wanted to make some cool, check it out. This wouldn't be in game, but you're doing like a splash screen kind of thing. So you've got, it's focusing on the table. Maybe she's unshaped a paperclip. So you can make a paperclip look unshaped by doing this, and that's just a cool piece of geometry, isn't it? You can do it with this. So some very, very cool things we can do. And again, it's all based off curves. So if I grab the geometry, hit delete history, now this is just what it is. And this curve is now able to do another. So I can do this. I can sweep again. You can see there I've got the same geometry, but obviously because I've changed the shape. But again, it's because this is being controlled by the geometry, I've got all this ability to go. Whoo. So sweep. It's very, very cool. So what we looked at revolve, which takes a curve and then revolves it around the center of the world. And there you can rapidly produce geometry. I've got loft, which I can take a curve from either up to top or down or top to down with however many curve sections you want, and it'll create a loft. Really good for doing kind of like static fabrics. And then we've got sweep mesh, and sweep mesh is really good for doing anything that's like wiry, ropey. When we come to do foliage, we can use it for creating vines or anything like that. It's got a million and one applications. So a nice quick video. What's that? Oh, on just over half an hour. 3 really cool little techniques. And though we've not really looked at it, the geometry you get from this is actually, sorry, not the UVs we get from this, are actually really useful. Not perfect, but really useful. So for the loft, this is what you get. Now if we check the checkerboard, it is a bit not very well distributed. Plus it's upside down. So it wouldn't be perfect, but it's a good starting off point. For the sweep mesh, it's actually really good. So the sweep meshes it gives us are really good. Really, really good. I like that. Now for the revolves, it's a bit different because this, I've actually messed with it a little bit. You know, I would need to go in there and re-UV at least some of it. But again, if we look at it, the UVs are on its side. Some of them are a bit stretched, so we'll still need to do a bit of work to get this looking correct. But again, we get something pretty much there already. You know, we don't have to do everything from scratch. So those are 3 really nice little tools to help us do some stuff. Now for me, I think revolve and sweep are the 2 of the best ones for this. Loft, few and far between for what we're doing, where we're going to be able to use this, but still very, very good. And then the next stuff I'm going to be showing you is, again, some more really, really cool stuff using curves, but then we're also going to do some simulation to produce like cushions and stuff. Cool. All right, see you in the next one.